to be here because I've got this stack. I gave you guys all Monopoly money, but who wants some real money? I've got some real money here. Come on up. No, don't come on up and get it. This is real money. I figured what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to throw it into the audience, and whatever you can grab, you can get. Okay, so I'll split it into two, and I'm gonna throw it. You guys ready for this? Just sit down. I'm not gonna throw it into the audience. You guys, you think I'm foolish? Yeah. No, But isn't there something funny when you see this much money? I mean, this is pretty good. I just liquidated our winter retreat fund, and I figured let's just spend it now instead of going to winter retreat, right? No, you see all this money, and something in you goes wild. Like, oh man, what could I do with all of that money? If I had money, there's not quite $500 here, but you see in your outline, even in that little blue box in your outline. If you didn't get an outline, there's some at the back table there. I think Bethany's back there. She can even grab some and pass them out if you guys need one. Just raise up your hand and she'll grab you one. But in that little blue box of your outline, while I'm talking tonight, just jot down a few things. Like if I gave you $500 tonight, what would you go home and want to buy right away? You know, maybe it's a new OLED switch, or maybe you've got your eye on this pretty cool electric scooter, or perhaps you're thinking, well, I just need gas for this week, and so $500 should cover that. Something like that. Whatever it would be, if you think of a couple things, you'll have a chance to share those things later on. But be thinking about that. As you guys know, we're in this series tonight. We started, if you missed last week, I'm sorry. I'll cut you up real briefly here. But we're in this series called Chasing. And we're looking at four different things that people could chase with their life. It could be things like happiness. That's what we talked about last week, if you missed us last week. Or money. That's tonight. Or things like popularity, or even satisfaction. People are constantly chasing. Inside of each of us, there's this desire to pursue and to acquire and to move forward. And this is not a bad desire. God put a passion in each one of your guys' hearts to like a drive forward. Maybe some more than another person, but if we didn't have a drive, if we didn't have any passion in our life to pursue something, then we would just sit at home and do nothing all the time. But God puts us in this drive, and really the main idea for the entire series is this, because it's a good thing, is the real pursuit in life is to chase after God's heart. Often these other things take the place of this pursuit, like money or popularity. We do whatever we can to be popular. We do whatever we can to acquire money, and we miss out on the relationship that God wants us to chase after. We just sang a song that says, I'm chasing you. I'm running after your heart. What does it mean to run after and to chase after God's heart? It means to desire what He wants for your life. To desire to spend time with God, saying, God, how should I better serve you? How should I better live for you? And so really the spoiler alert of the end of the series, I hope you grasp, is this one simple statement, is that the real pursuit in life is to chase after God's heart. But let's get back to talking about money. Like I said before, there's something that kind of burns in your heart when you see a stack of real cash here. For some of you guys, when I walked around with this Monopoly money, I gave you the choice. And there's some of you that are like, yeah, I'll just take the dollar. I'm surprised that I had one, Chloe, took the 500 like a smart person. But some of you guys, I just handed you dollar bills and stuff and forced you to have what you had. Some of you guys got the dollar and you're like, oh man, I wanted the 500. Because there's this, we want the most of stuff a lot of times. But, I'm going to give you a couple truths about money tonight that I'm sure are not new to you, but it's good to remember and to acknowledge these things. All right, so I'm going to give you two truths. These are on your outline, things that you can fill in. It's underneath that blue box in your outline. And the first one is simply this: money will not make you happy. You might feel happy for a moment, but money over the long term is not going to solve your problems, fix your life, make you happy, make you feel that happiness. Money's not going to make you happy. We all dream of stuff that we can buy with money. Like imagine if your parents won the lottery, and they got $50 million. You'd buy, you'd get nice cars and a big house and, a huge boat, maybe take a fancy vacation and all this stuff. But see, we think that money will solve our problems, but it doesn't. In fact, I want you to watch this little video just speaking about the lottery. Check out this video. It's from CNN.
This is the stuff of dreams.
I'd probably buy my wife a new car.
I'll be able to pay off my student loan.
Retire, most definitely.
$500 million before taxes. That's how much you can win in the Powerball jackpot. If you win, you can buy a lot of stuff. But what about happiness? Well, it turns out those cliches, money can't buy you happiness, money doesn't make the man, a fool and his money are easily parted, there's some truth to them. Only about half of all lottery winners are happier 3 years later, says Michael Boone, whose Seattle firm advises big lotto winners.
I think Henry Ford said it really, really well. He said that money doesn't change a person, it simply unmasks them. And I think that really is what happens. So people have an opportunity to do all the things that they dreamed of, and sometimes those are good things and sometimes they're not.
Christmas 2002, Jack Whitaker of West Virginia had the only winning ticket in the $314 million lottery jackpot. 2 years later, his wife said that she wishes she had torn up the ticket. Their lives in shambles. Their 17-year-old granddaughter was dead after struggling with a drug addiction. Whitaker faced multiple lawsuits and was arrested twice for drunken driving. Abraham Shakespeare, Florida, was murdered after winning $31 million. Then there's Amanda Clayton, a young mother who won $1 million in the Michigan lottery. She made headlines when she continued to collect food stamps. She was found dead of an apparent drug overdose.
You see, money does not make you happy. Just that's proof. I mean, people had millions and millions of dollars, and yet their life ended up in shambles. And so, just take that concept that happiness doesn't come from the more stuff you have. That's we're jumping off from what we talked about even last week about happiness. It's only temporary. That temporary high of getting money, of getting stuff. It's just temporary. In fact, I love what the Bible says in Mark chapter 8. This is on the back of your outline at the very top. You can always check those out. Mark chapter 8. It says this, in fact, this is Jesus talking. He says, "What do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul?" Jesus is speaking here to his disciples. He just got done telling them about what it's going to cost to follow him. The following Jesus doesn't mean all of a sudden your life is awesome and you get everything you want and you're going to be healed from all your sicknesses and you're going to have all the money in the world. Jesus says there is a real cost to following him. But he says, other people, they chase after money. But here's the thing, here's the truth, is it doesn't benefit you to gain everything and lose out on eternity. In fact, this kind of leads to the second truth I want to point to is this: money will not last forever. Money won't last forever. Just think with me for a second, back to Christmas of this last year. What did you get? You can be thinking in your mind, what were some of the gifts that you got for Christmas this last year? And you might even have to think hard. You might have forgotten already. What were it's like 8 months ago or 9 months ago, and you're thinking, I don't even remember what I got for Christmas. Maybe some of you guys, know exactly what you got, and you're loving it, and you're living with it, and you're enjoying it still. But I'll be honest with you, a lot of you, some of that stuff probably is broken or forgotten about in the closet right now. And if it's not, it will one day end up in a pile of trash in a heap, because it's not going to last forever. I grew up going to a pretty nice community public school. And I always felt like I didn't match up with the other people in my public school. They were a little bit more wealthy than I was growing up. In fact, when it came time to buy a new car, when I was 16, I was excited. But bunch of my friends, their parents bought them brand new cars for their 16th birthday. And I'm not talking like a new to them car. I'm talking about they went to the car dealer and off the lot with 0 miles, they bought a brand new car. One of my friends got a brand new Mustang 5.0, which was the highest at that time, the best Mustang that they sold. And this girl got this from her parents. And I just didn't feel like I could keep up, right? And sometimes that's the problem with money is it's not that you really wanted, like I didn't really want a Mustang, but I wanted to keep pace. I wanted to keep going with my friends. I wanted to stay on par with them. You know, I saw this bumper sticker, maybe you've seen it before. It says this, if you look on the car, it says, "He who dies with the most toys wins." You know, that's the attitude of the world. I'm going to accumulate as much stuff as I possibly can so that at the end of the day, when I die, I can be like, I win. I have the most stuff in the world. But obviously we know this wrong. I saw instead a T-shirt that kind of flips the switch on this. It says, "He who dies with the most toys still dies." You know, that's the truth of it all. You're going to die one day, and all of your stuff is going to be left here to rot. Or maybe to be passed on to somebody else, and then they're going to break it and lose it. It's not going to provide you eternity. Money and stuff will not last forever. You know, the difficult thing is we can know this truth, but it's still difficult to escape this desire. This, like, when you see a stack of cash, to escape this passion about, I want some of that. I totally get that. I would say that if that's you want to escape it, the best thing you can do, I'm going to get to some practical tips here in a moment, but the best thing you can do is to start by just asking God to release this desire from you. Pray, spend time saying, "God, help me not to just care so much about money." But I want to share with you a story that comes from the Gospel of Luke. And if you do have a Bible, you might want to turn to Luke. We're gonna look at this passage a little bit longer. Or if you have the outline, it's on the back of your outline. It's Luke chapter 12, verses 15 to 21. And let me read a few of these verses and to illustrate this topic of money. It says, "Then he," and this is Jesus talking to the crowd. So when it says he, that's talking about Jesus. "Then Jesus said, 'Beware. Guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own.' Then he told them this story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, 'What should I do? I don't have room for all of my crops.'" Now, before I get too far into this story, I want you to notice something right there in verse 16. Jesus calls the guy rich. And then he says he has a fertile farm that produced fine crops. You could even underline that phrase. He had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. What was Jesus saying? This man had everything he needed. He wasn't destitute. He wasn't poor. He wasn't hungry. No, he was wealthy. He was rich. He had everything that he could ever want. He had a home, he had a job, he had food, he had good food even, fine crops it says there. But check out what happens next in this passage here. It says, "Then he said," this is the man, "I know, I'll tear down my barns and I'm going to build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all of my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and I'll say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.'" So this guy has all he could ever want, and yet he comes up with his stupid idea in verse 18 that he's gonna just work harder and get even more stuff and keep working. And then this phrase, he says, "I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry." Maybe you've heard that phrase before, or somebody might say, "Hey, that's in the Bible, so I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry." What you don't get is we're actually taught the opposite. This man is saying this, not Jesus. We're being taught the opposite of this principle here. So don't say just because it's in the Bible that's something to follow there. Jesus is saying do the opposite. But verse 20, let me move on. Verse 20 here. It says, "But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. Let me point your attention to a couple things in this passage. You can make some notes in your Bible if you want to. Jesus calls him, this verse 21, this last verse, he says, he calls people a fool if all they're doing is struggling to get earthly wealth. You could underline that phrase, earthly wealth, and see how Jesus positions it against a rich relationship with God. He uses the same kind of wording to say, this desire, this passion we have to gather wealth and money and stuff is the same way we should gather and have a passion to desire a rich, a healthy relationship with God. And if you don't do that, Jesus says straight out, he calls people fools for doing that. So, this story gives us a great principle that money's not going to last forever. We never know when it's going to be taken from us. But I want to give you guys 3 things tonight that are practical money advice. They don't necessarily come from the Bible, from Scripture, but they're from me as a parent, as a dad, as an adult, that, some ways that I can pass on some wisdom to you guys. So 3 very simple, practical money advice tips that you can do. And the first one is this: tithe first. Tithe first. You might say, well, what's tithe? I've never heard of what the word tithe. Tithe is a scriptural word. It's a biblical word for 10%. And the Old Testament principle is that we are to give 10% of our wealth back to God. The way that this was played out in the Old Testament is they had a tabernacle. Let's call it a church. They had a church, and there was people who worked at the church. They were called the Levites, and their job was to work at the church, at the tabernacle, and everybody else's job was to do something like be a farmer, or be a herds person and tend to animals, or be a painter, or be a blacksmith. Everybody had a different job, right? And so God set up this principle that if everybody gave 10% of their earnings or their wealth back to the church, then the Levites that worked at the church would be able to continue to work at the church and keep the upkeep there. They didn't have a chance to raise crops. The Levites didn't. And so the farmers who raised crops all gave 10% of their wheat. So now the Levites have wheat. The Levites couldn't tend sheep because they were doing other things at the church. So the sheep herders gave 1 sheep out of my 10 to the Levites so that they could have a sheep to sacrifice or to eat. And so you see, the principle is set up by God in that way. What's interesting, a lot of people say, that's the Old Testament. We shouldn't live by that. Well, how many of you guys are in Bible quizzing? Raise your hand if you're in Bible quizzing, right? Yep. So you guys are studying the book of Acts. When you get to Acts chapter 2, I didn't put it on your outline or in the screen. Acts chapter 2 verses, let's say 43, 44, I can't remember the exact verse. But it says that the disciples gave everything they had so that they could build community and live together. And so really the New Testament principle is to give everything. We don't really follow that. I guess in our heart we say that we want to give everything we have to God. But here at this church, this is my job. I get paid to do this job. And it's not just, I don't just work on Wednesday night from 7 to 8 o'clock. I work 40 or 50 plus hours a week. And I'm able to do that because you, or maybe your parents, or other people are obedient to this principle and they tithe back to the church. The reason why we have lights, the reason why we have a screen, the reason why we have this piano here, everything, a pen that's in your hand to write on the outline is because somebody tithed out of obedience to God. You can even think of yourself, you can be like, well, I don't have any money, Ken. I get it, that's okay. But this principle, so when you do receive money, when you start working, make it a priority to your first thing is to tithe to God. Let me move on to the second thing here to learn from, and that's this. This is save at least 10%. So you're tithing to the church, to God, 10%. Now you save 10%. You don't just spend all of your money on, candy or Nintendo games, but you should set aside at least 10%. I say at least because, quite honestly, you guys don't have expenses like I do. I've got a mortgage to pay for. I've got cars to pay for. I've got children to feed. I've got, all these things that are expenses. And so for me, I have to budget all my money. For you guys, some of you might be like, well, I have to pay gas in my car. Okay, that's an expense, but it's definitely not as much. And so it's probably easier for you to save even more than 10% of your income if you have a job. If you don't have a job, and let's say you get money for your birthday, don't just go out and spend it all. Set aside a little bit as a savings account. When I was 14 years old, I was a paper boy. I don't know if you guys even know what a paper boy is because they don't exist these days. But I actually rolled up newspapers, rode on my bike, and I put them in people's houses in my neighborhood. And you're like, what's a newspaper? I know. So it's this like piece of paper with writing on it and stuff. And so I would go and I would do this. I get paid like $30 or $40 every week to do this. It was hard work, but I still got paid some. And my dad taught me this principle to save my money. And so I would save my money every year. And about once a year, I would splurge and I would buy something awesome. Like the first thing I bought was this. Do you know what that is? That's called a Discman. And this plays compact discs or CDs. It doesn't play MP3s, doesn't play anything else but a CD, 12 songs. It was awesome. This was amazing when it came out. The thing would skip if you touched it though. It would be like you would be playing music and then it would stop and skip. And so you had to just like leave it on the table and put your headphones in and listen to it. But honestly, like this was the iPhone of the day. This was the best thing ever. I was able to buy one with my money when I was 14. And then when I was 15, I somehow convinced my parents to let me buy my own 13-inch TV for my bedroom so that I could play my Nintendo Entertainment System in my bedroom and enjoy it. I remember going down to the store and picking this thing up. It doesn't exist anymore, but that's okay. And then my prize possession that I bought with my savings was the original Game Boy. I wanted to play Tetris. Have you guys ever played Tetris before? Tetris is an amazing game, and I was able to buy a Game Boy. I loved it. Unfortunately, it's broken. All of these things that I own now are all broken, and they all don't exist anymore. But I love these things. But when I was 16 years old, and I got my driver's license, I had still saved up enough money to buy a car. And so I told my dad, I said, Dad, I had saved up a couple $1,000. I'd like to go buy a car. And my dad, he said, you know what? Because you were so diligent at saving your money for this purpose, I'm going to buy a car for you instead. I was amazed by that. He said, but there's a catch. You got to take that $2,000 that you've saved up and open a retirement account. When I was 16 years old, my dad made me open a retirement account that I still have today. And that's why, guys, I am a millionaire up here. I'm not a millionaire, no. But not even close to it. But honestly, I still have that retirement account set aside for one day, maybe in 60 years when I retire. And I'm going to have my money from a paper boy from when I was a kid. Because my dad kind of honored this savings that I had worked on. But here's the last thing. The biggest thing that we got to be careful of is debt. Debt is like this giant weight that will take you down. If you're in debt, you won't be able to tithe. If you're in debt, you're not going to be able to save like you want to. Debt ruins basically your chances at living the way that God has intended you to do with money. And so really the third thing you can write there is to be careful about debt. Be careful about debt. I know for many of you guys, you don't have a chance right now to have debt. You don't have a credit card. That's good. Some of you guys, maybe you do. Usually I think it takes till you're 18 till you get a credit card. But let me tell you about my friend Matt. Matt, when he turned 18, he got this thing in the mail that said you can apply for a credit card, and he's like, awesome. So he did it. He got a credit card, and he went to the store, and he realized this is like free money. I just swipe the credit card, they give me stuff. This is great. And sure enough, he did it, and he maxed out this brand new credit card, about $3,000 max limit on it. And he's like, shoot, I got to pay this back. Well, he couldn't pay it all back. He could pay like $50 every month on it. But so he thought, well, I still got to buy stuff. So he got a second credit card. And he used that one, maxed it out. I met Matt when he was a senior in college. And he told me this story of the credit cards that he had. And at the time, as a senior in college, he had a debt of over $100,000. He was shackled because he didn't know how to control his spending. And I don't know, it's been like 20 plus years since that moment, but there is the chance that he's still paying off that debt from his time in college. It was 2 years that it took him to rack up $100,000 in debt. So you guys might not have a chance to have a credit card yet, but I want to tell you this principle before you make the mistake. If you ever get a credit card, pay it off. Don't carry debt at all. It just shackles your life, and it makes things absolutely worse in the long run. Let me close this off with turning it back to the scripture. 1 Timothy chapter 6 says this: "For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money have wandered from their true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows." You've probably heard that phrase before. Maybe you didn't know that it's actually the love of money. It's not, people sometimes say, yep, money's the root of all evil. It's actually the love of money. Money in itself is not bad. But when we chase after it, when we pursue after it, when that's all we can think about, that can lead to evil, to bad stuff happening, and from us turning away from our relationship with God. Let me remind you of that last verse of that Luke passage that we looked at again. It says, yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. And that is the main idea right there. When money controls you, it leads to distraction from God. When we give ourselves over to money, and that's all we chase and pursue, our relationship with God is strained, and it really can pull us away from even having a right relationship with God.